as a follower of Jesus Christ, I believe in Christmas, and I believe in the redemption of Jesus. So Christmas is the biggest holiday, but I really appreciate Thanksgiving because of what it stands for. It's not nearly as commercialized, and it's really just about feeling gratitude for all the things in your life, for your friends, for your family. The fact that we get to live in the United States of America.
Yes, sir.
The greatest country.
Yes, sir.
In the history of the world.
Yes, sir.
And just the freedom that we have.
Yes.
The freedom to dream and do and be and behave the way we want to dream and do and behave. Such a wonderful gift.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, we've got those Thanksgiving vibes going on for sure. And
dude, that's awesome, dude.
Something that's been on my mind a lot lately. The hardest thing to be.
What is it?
Is yourself. I've been pondering that thought lately. It's, we live in a very busy world and there's so much going on. We live at such a feverish pace that I think the hardest thing to learn to be is yourself. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story. I think in order to get real fulfillment in life, you've got to put yourself in a position where you're content. Right, where the things that you're doing on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis fill your heart, fill your soul, right? And so I think the hardest thing I've had to learn throughout my life is, I always ask myself, Boubacar, what do I want? Why do I want it? Who do I need to help? And how am I going to do it? Those are kind of the four pillars. And one day I want to produce a course because I think that could be very valuable. It certainly was for my own life to get that level of clarity. What do you want? Why do you want it? Who do you need to help? And then how are you going to do it?
Yeah.
There's an old saying, when the why is clear, the how becomes easy. And I believe when you have the right who's, they'll figure out the hows. So these are just kind of some of the things I've learned throughout my journey in the last 15 years or so of running business and meeting people. But there's a new question I asked myself recently, and I say recently, I'd say about a year ago, and it's just hard. It's really hard. The most important question that I've missed, and I can't believe I missed it because it's so obvious, but the first question is, who am I? Right?
Who are you?
Yeah, so, I'm still thinking through that, Boubacar.
Yeah.
I think the reality of it is that, I'm a father to my children. I'm a husband to my wife. I'm a follower of Jesus. Right? But you know what's funny? For 20 years of my life, I've lived almost all that time with one identity.
Okay.
You want to know what that is?
What is it?
I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I'm a businessman.
What does that mean, though?
Well,
because I feel like everybody talks about entrepreneurship and business, but you've been doing it. The difference between talking about it and doing. You've been doing it for majority of your life. If you could give us some clarity of what do you think that is personally?
Well, I think that it's so many things are changing for me personally, and I think in the world we live in too. But at the end of the day, when you're in a business. What is a business? Well, a business is an organization of people that are aligned on a common cause, a common mission. But even simpler than that, a business is nothing more than solving a problem in exchange for money.
Yes.
That's all a business is.
That's it is, yep.
So you see problem, you solve problem. That's a concept. Hey, I see this problem, I'm going to try to solve it. That's a concept. That's not a business.
That's not a business yet.
That's an idea.
An idea, yeah.
But if you get good at seeing and solving that problem, then you might find a client, you might solve the problem for them, and then money exchange happens. And at that point, it's time to find your community. It's time to build a group of people. That could be 2 people or it could be 200 people, right? That are aligned on a common vision, a common mission. But it's ultimately still about solving that problem.
Yes.
But so, to answer your question, well, what is an entrepreneur? I guess what I'm trying to articulate today is I've spent 20 years of my life operating in an identity of an entrepreneur, right? But the reality of that is that I haven't given a whole lot of space to the reality that I'm a follower of Jesus.
Yes.
Right? I'm a husband to my wife.
To your wife.
I'm a father to my children.
Yes.
And don't get me wrong, I haven't abandoned my post as a husband.
Yes.
Or as a father.
Yes.
Or as a follower of Christ. But I think the hardest thing to be is yourself. That's just the reality of it. It's easy. You want to know the easiest thing for me to do?
What's the easiest
Go
thing?
start 10 more businesses over the next decade and generate another $200 million in revenue.
Yes.
That'd be the easiest thing to do.
Yes.
Because that's what I'm comfortable with.
Yes.
That's the problem that I know.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of pain that you experience when you step outside that comfort level
Yeah, because that's what you know.
Yeah, so like it's like I'm relearning who I am at 36 years old, and it's because I literally slowed down enough to not go through the four cores.
Okay.
Right? What do I want? Why do I want it? Who do I need to help?
Yeah.
How do I?
Yeah.
That's a process that works.
Yeah.
And I've had multiple businesses over the last 2 decades that prove that process works.
Yes.
If you have the right what, the clear why, you're around the right who, solving the right problem, then that dog will hunt.
Okay.
And I've seen it hunt. But I've missed something so obvious to me.
What is it?
But it's requiring me to step outside that comfort zone. Who am I? It's like, well, am I going to be content with running businesses my entire life? I don't think so, right? And it's scary. It's like going to the gym.
Yeah.
Right? Like you've never worked out ever before. You go to the gym, you're on the treadmill for 10 minutes and it feels like you're gonna die.
Yeah.
Right?
And you're like, where am I going with this?
Yeah. You want to go to the gym, you're like, oh, if I go work out twice this month,
I've got to
no, dude, you gotta work out twice a day for 9 months to see results.
To see a result, yeah.
So it requires you to step outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And that's the we're talking about the eve of Thanksgiving, but the day before Thanksgiving, I'm truly grateful for the burden that has been this new discovery process. Because the only thing really fundamentally different, Boubacar, is I've started asking, who am I? Right? And I don't really even know what that means in the sense of, I don't know the whole battle plan for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
But here's one thing I do know. Who I am is a person who has a story. Right? I have launched multiple businesses that have reached 7 and 8 figures in revenue. Started them all from scratch.
From zero.
I'm a bootstrapper. Nobody's ever given me nothing.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm also a child who went through a lot of trauma in my youth, right? Who, knows what it's like to live in a household that's chaotic.
Yeah.
That's stricken with addiction and abuse and, drugs and alcohol and incarceration. That's part of my story.
Part of your life, yeah.
And I'm not saying that to look at me. Oh, yeah. That's not, but I think, who am I? I'm this person who, you want to know why I think I've always started a business?
What is it?
It's because I think that growing up, I was always used to the pressure of chaos. Does that make sense?
How is that related with business, though?
Well, because business gives you a sense of control.
It does, yeah, in a way.
So for some people, when it's calm outside, they get chaotic inside.
Yeah.
And that's part of who I am. If things are really calm and going really well, like there's no problem, I'm the kind of person that sometimes I'll create a problem. Just
who you are.
Just so I can have something to do.
Yeah.
Right? It's a learned behavior.
Okay.
You grow up in real chaotic environments and the shoe's gonna drop any minute.
Yeah.
It's almost like I'm a caveman.
You find your comfort in that chaos.
That's right. It becomes your new normal.
Yes.
And so now I look around, it's like an analogy I've heard from a psychiatrist. I went to this wonderful institution. It's called the Amen Clinic, AMEN, and they have facilities all across America. And they're one of the leading edge research institutes on mental health.
Okay.
And I did this a year ago to start learning more about myself. Because I would always have these trophies. It was so repeatable, man.
Okay.
There's a big problem. I'm excited. I want to go do this. And then I'd get on that journey and I'd go do it. And then at the end of that, I'd be like, well, that was fun when it was hard, but now it's solved and I'm depressed.
Okay.
And so I'd find another trophy.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Another pursuit. And this went on for my entire life.
Yeah.
And so I started realizing, like, dude, that's not normal. That's just not normal. So I'm like, all right, I need to work on that. So this psychiatrist at Amen Clinic said, it's kind of like your basal ganglia. It turns out what's happening in my brain chemistry, because we've talked about this before, right?
Yeah.
Mental health is just brain health. That's all it is. It's not scary. You're not some freak. It's not leprosy. You don't have spots. Dude, everybody struggles with it.
It's part of knowing who you are, right?
The reality of being a human being.
Yeah.
And it talks about these things all the way back in the scriptures, right? That's why we're called to think of things that are pure and noble and honest. And, we're called to think on such things. So, for me, I have an overactive basal ganglia, which is your fear receptor. It's like, you ever heard in psychology, fight, flight, or freeze?
Yes, I've heard that before.
Yeah, so those are the 3 things you have. You either fight, you flight, or you freeze. And so it turns out And a psychiatrist told me one day that that's basically what that means is I'm living with a prehistoric brain.
Prehistoric brain.
Prehistoric brain. And she broke it down. She said, it's kind of like this, Chad. You know, back in the days, back in the way day, like caveman days, you know, cavemen would be in a cave and they would have to be very cautious of stepping outside that cave because there's imminent danger. There's a tiger.
Okay.
And if they just walked out there unprepared, that tiger could eat them.
Okay.
Right? So that's what I realized. I was able to draw that correlation between my identity of who I am has always been wrapped in, well, I'm a business owner. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm the boss. I'm the guy that goes and makes a bunch of money, solves a bunch of problems. But what was really happening on a brain chemistry level is I needed a fight. I needed a problem to solve. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
So that gave my brain this stimulant that it needed to feel normal. Because again, for some people, calm is chaos and chaos is calm.
Yeah.
Right?
But how do you make that transition though? Like, if you hunting businesses and doing all that was what gave you that balance, like how do you replace that though? If you
know, man, that's something that I'm so grateful for because I don't know.
Yeah. So you're just gonna continue to build businesses. And nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, but I think who am I? Right?
Yeah.
I'm a follower of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
So how I'm going to build businesses in the future, it's going to look a little different.
Yes.
Than how I've done it in the past.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I'm following.
Because what I'm starting to realize, even through a few projects I'm doing here and there, I feel really good when I'm out there. I have an idea, build an early team, solve a problem, and make money. That's a good feeling for me. It lasts 6 to 9 months.
Yep.
Maybe 12 months. And then after that, I get bored again.
You're like, what am I gonna do?
You know, I get bored again. Kind of like when I was in school. I was a terrible student, and they said I had ADD because I couldn't pay attention.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't that. It was that I generally learned pretty fast.
And you got bored.
When I learned it, I didn't want all the details. I wanted to move on to something more challenging.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's kind of the same way in my real life.
Yes.
You know, because I'm still a student of the game of life.
I'm living every day.
So I realized through a couple projects that I've done, and there's a certain light within my heart that burns brighter when I'm not being the person that's the original founder. In other words, there's something intrinsically about who I am that I've just now started to create a little bit of space for that is a helper to people.
Okay.
Like the idea that there's another Boubacar or Amber,
John,
Bob, or John that's young, that's green, that's maybe not as experienced, but maybe they have a story too. Yeah. They have demons, man. Yeah. Right? We all do. It may be mental health, it may be incarceration, addiction, it may not be something that dark. It might not be depression or you know, mental health, but they're trapped, chasing something. Yes. And there's something about who I am when I ask who am I, right? That I think it really is what the gospel talks about. You know, the whole book of the Bible, you can sum it up in 2 commands, Boubacar: love God, love others. Yes. So I'm just now, and I'm grateful for it because it's so hard. And frankly, it's hard for me right now. It's difficult. It's not easy. What's easy is what I've done my whole life. Going and finding business. Find problems, solve problems, start business, grow business, be bored with business, and do something else. Do something else, yeah. Right. Repeat. Yeah. And I've done that enough times where I know how to do that, but it's not as fulfilling as it used to be. Okay. Does that make sense? Yes. So what I'm realizing is like, hey, I think who I am is a child of God who has a heart for serving other people. Okay. And so it looks way different when you're trying to serve a client or an employee. Yeah. When you're serving another founder. Yes. Another business owner, another entrepreneur. Because what I'm starting to see through this little journey is there's so many people that are just like me. In other words, they're kind of crazy. Crazy people. Right? They're irrational. We all crazy. Yeah. But they have insane issues that largely result from some trauma, something they're running away from. Yes. And they're calling it in the name of business. Yes. They want a bigger house. They want a bigger boat. They want a hotter wife. They want better clothes for their kids. And they work so hard to get it, and they get it, and they realize that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow it didn't give them that feel-good feeling that they thought.
So this is a really interesting conversation here, because I'm listening to you and I'm saying, okay, so the trauma, sometimes when you go through trauma, that trauma could be a blessing, right? Like how your brain will receive that trauma and now you're hunting businesses or you're doing some great things with that. But that blessing could also end up being a curse.
1,000,000%.
Man.
Yeah, it's a fine line. You know, it's and I don't get too personal. We'll have plenty of time for that, which, you know, I'm an open book. But you can take the story of my mother. You know, my mother, she's struggled with severe mental health issues. And I'm not talking about like, hey, bipolar or depression, take some Prozac and you're good to go.
Like real issues.
It's been a real struggle, man. We've checked her at, you know, I've put her in rehab 9 times.
Wow.
You know, she's been in 4 different mental health institutions. She's checked into Red Rock, which is in Norman. I've lost track of how many times, more than 2 dozen. But, you know, and it's for so long, I was so angry with her. Because that was a big burden. The oldest of 3 kids, that's a burden to
to carry.
Kids are supposed to care for their parents, or parents are supposed to care for their kids, not the other way around.
Yeah.
And it's not a story, like if you think about my mother's story, to your point, you know, this is a girl that was molested by her stepfather.
That's crazy.
At 6 years old.
Yeah, that trauma.
It happened incessantly. And she lived in a home, and her own mother, knew about it. It didn't do
anything about it. Okay.
Right. So, like, could you imagine living under the weight of
trauma? Yeah.
So, you know, my mom, you know, like you said, that trauma can be a battle or a blessing.
Yes.
And it's such a razor thin line.
Yes.
You know. So some parts of me have to realize, like with her in particular, and there's so many people out there that have this same story, right? But with her, it didn't go the way, you know, it didn't turn into be a blessing. Now her story's still being written, and God can cure all kinds of things.
Absolutely.
And we're still hopeful and optimistic that God turns her ashes into beauty, you know. But, you know, for her, she wasn't fortunate. You know, she didn't have a good support group. And, you know, she married my father, and, you know, they had me and my brother and my sister, but, you know, they did things with choices, right? And this is kind of gets into philosophy and, you know, some deep, pretty deep, like what's the meaning of life conversation. Some people want to know, is it destiny or is it choice?
Yes.
What's the more powerful?
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot in terms of religion, but just in terms of cause and effect, you know, is it faith or is it acts?
Yes.
You know, and the reality is it's both.
It's both.
You know, so like in my mother's story, you know, there was a lot of drugs and alcohol, which is part of the culture.
Yes.
But, you know, when you have childhood trauma.
Oh, yeah.
And when you feel trapped in the weight of the guilt.
Yeah.
And then you have children, and life's great. They had a magical life. You know, it was awesome being loved. I was the best mother in the world. My father was awesome.
Yeah.
We were the house everybody got to for the holidays.
Yes.
We were always helping everybody.
Yeah.
Like my mom always had that servant heart. My dad was the same way.
Yeah.
But, you know, put in drugs and alcohol. So I think that's choice.
Yes.
Right? And that affects your brain chemistry. And then when life goes through trials and tribulations, what happens to all of us? Well, when drugs and alcohol are your only constant, well, now all of a sudden you need more drugs to get that same relief.
Yes.
Now all of a sudden you need more alcohol
to get that relief.
Right? And then put 10 years compound on that.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
And that's where people that are incarcerated, that struggle with addiction and mental health, which happens to be a passion of mine because it's part of my story.
Yes.
Right? I'm a child of that environment. But I have a great deal of empathy for it because it's some complex riddle between faith and acts, you know, destiny versus choice. And she just didn't have those resources, man. Think about it. 25 years ago, you know, when you say you have mental health, you might as well have a scarlet letter.
Yeah, nobody
can.
And
I appreciate, you know, I'm grateful that the world is opening up to the reality of mental health.
Yeah.
But we still have so much further to go. You know, we're 100 years behind of our cardiovascular knowledge. In other words,
oh, really?
Yeah, it's going to take
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's going to take us 100 years from today to know as much about the brain as we know about the organ that's the heart.
Wow.
You know, and I think a lot about heart and mind.
Yeah.
Right? And I think a lot about faith and acts. I think a lot about destiny versus decisions. So, so yeah, you know, my mother kind of, you know, I guess you could say drew the wrong stick, and that created a lot of some of my own trauma with my own story. And And I was just a kid, like so many of us,
Yeah.
that's running away from that trauma.
Yes.
And the way I did it, Bubakar, it wasn't so much drugs and alcohol,
Yeah.
right? But I'm an addict.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say that.
Workaholic, would you say?
Yeah, entrepreneurialism.
Entrepreneur, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
intellectualism. Like
Yeah.
my mind
Needs to be
races
stimulated
with
all the
thoughts.
time. Yeah.
And
yeah.
so just because my addiction might seem cool, you know, I've taken my kids to 42 states.
Dude, that's awesome though.
We've traveled.
Like, who wouldn't? If that's the definition of addiction, every kid's probably dream of having a parent.
Yeah, but it's sometimes I tell people want to do what I've done.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so I mean, it's cool, the Disney trips, and we've seen the Golden Gate Bridge, and the Statue of Liberty, and the Archway in St. Louis. I mean, we've seen so much, and I'm so grateful for those.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, being a good entrepreneur provided financial opportunities for me to buy a motorhome,
family, yes.
Take 9-month vacations, and
Yes.
take 2-year sabbatical, but just because it's not alcohol or drugs doesn't mean it's healthy.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you got to know yourself. I think that's the most hardest thing. And just to bring it back to what we started with, right?
Mm-hmm.
The hardest thing to be?
What is hard to be yourself? Yeah.
Right.
So it's a constant search. It seems like it's like a lifetime, right? It's like a lifetime because who you thought you were 10 years ago and today, just it's different, right? Because of the information you've got.
It is, because the easiest thing to do is to continue with the pain of the familiar.
Okay.
Right? I mean, that's the life that most of us resign to. Like, there may be something so much better on the other side, but we'd just rather be content with the pain that we have today.
Yeah.
The little death of 1,000 little cuts.
Yes.
And I've tried to never be that. And I admit, I'm a hard man to love, so I pray for my wife. God, give me something special.
Give her a little shout out.
Yeah, she is the yin to my yang.
That's
I tell
awesome,
people, and I'll say it again, I've never been more blessed than the day that the Lord gave me my wife. She gives me so much grace.
It's a blessing.
And she gives me so much freedom to discover who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'll never forget the day I told her, hey, I'm shutting down the business and we're buying a motorhome. And she said, okay, let's go.
Let's do
And
it.
she packed.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later at the campground of KOA in San Antonio, God was speaking to me one morning in Germany. He said, Chad, I made you to build things.
Yeah, go back to it.
And there's a part of you that's never going to be content unless you're building things.
Yeah.
And so I walked into the motorhome 9:30 in the morning and I said, hey, it's time to go back home. And she said, okay, let's go.
Let's go.
And she packed.
Yep.
And so it's very rare that
That's a blessing, though. Yeah, that's
I'm
a blessing.
getting chills right now.
Yeah.
Just, it's very rare that a man has a woman like that. And,
She's allowing you to be the true leader that you are.
and to always be willing to cut bait with anything old to rediscover who I am.
Oh, okay.
That's part of my nature. So, the hardest thing to be is often just yourself. I'll give you another good example, Bubakar. You know who I am?
Who are you?
I'm meant to be in front of a camera.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I hate that, dude.
Yeah, you don't like
I
it.
told you.
I know you don't like
You've
it.
been pushing me and pushing me, but that's the truth, right? I have a story, I mean, here's a kid, here's a guy, he's 36 years old, has generated over $300 million in sales.
Absolutely.
Who's come from abuse, addiction, neglect, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know a whole lot of people that have checked their mother into rehab 9 times that's also created into $200 million.
At the same time, yeah.
And I've always hidden behind that because I just don't believe life's about me.
Yes.
The we is greater than the me.
Yep.
That's one of the core values I have as a man, but also in one of our companies, we over me.
Yes.
So I've even like right now, you're pushing me, we're doing our content sessions, you've got big vision, you want podcast and you want this and build a personal brand. And it's like, it's so uncomfortable for me.
It is.
You know what's easier?
Yeah.
Go find problem, solve problem,
Do
build
your business.
Get bored.
Yeah, get bored.
That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
Every time you challenge me to do something like, I'm like, nah, I don't want to do that. I'd rather just talk to Bubakar about this business idea I got.
Then let's do it.
Find problem, solve problem, grow it up. And then we're like, okay, we don't like that no more. Let's go do something else. But so like, this is what I'm saying. It's been very hard for me this past 12 months, but just like anything hard, man.
Yeah.
If you just have a positive attitude and don't quit.
Yes.
Right? In the word, in the book of James, it says, and this is one of my favorite scriptures of all the Bible, it says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds.
Yes.
Because it's through that produces perseverance.
Oh man,
right?
Okay, that's beautiful.
And perseverance allows you to finish your works. So like, what does that mean?
That was gonna be my question. I don't mean to cut you off, because even though you were dealing with so much family and stuff and helping being there for your mother and everything, at the same time you were building these businesses and sales and everything like that. So if somebody's out there today and whatever they're going through, can you tell them, share your story, how you were able to handle both, right? Because I don't think a lot of people can handle family or whatever issue, because there's always something going on, right? How did you handle both?
Well, that's a good question. And I can tell you how I did handle it, but I'd also say that's probably not the right way. It was right for me. You know, I'll put it as simple as I know how, dude. I'm a 19-year-old kid, brokenhearted, thinking if I can make 10 grand a month, then I'm going to have love. My life's going to be meaningful, and all this chaos is going to magically disappear.
Yeah, it didn't.
And it didn't work like that.
Yeah.
And I ran that goal all the way up to $1 million a year and exceeded that net income. And it still didn't give me any peace. But you know what it did?
What it did?
You know, action cures fear. 100% of the time. So for anybody that's out there that may be in that early phase, right? You've got the odds stacked against you. Maybe you're like me and you're used to hearing the words, "You'll never be good enough." Maybe you're like me and some of your own relatives, they say, "That'll never work. Go get a real job." Right? Maybe you're like me and you're voted most likely to be incarcerated, right? And you just need to get out of that trap, right? Well, I can tell you, nothing cures fear like action. So if you're not prepared to take massive action, I hate to tell you this on the eve of Thanksgiving, but you basically have zero chance.
You're not going to make it.
You have zero chance. But there's a fine line between taking massive action for so long that you miss the point. And that's where I believe the more powerful of faith versus acts is faith.
Yes.
So that's what I did, Boubacar. When it was a lot, I just went to work. And I lived by this mantra: when all else fails, get to work.
Get to work.
But I worked an unhealthy amount.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and it was an escape. Like in my mind, looking back, boogeyman was in the closet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there was a boogeyman.
Yeah.
And he was in my closet.
Yeah.
He took residence in my own home. And so I just ran.
Yeah.
I was so afraid I was running.
So that was fear.
And on the outside, you know, everybody looking at the Instagram or the socials, I mean, it looked like
great.
I had the greatest life ever.
Yes.
Right?
Hey, that's crazy though, because, you know, somebody was saying, I don't know where I read it the other day, me and you talked about it, how, you know, you could go on social media, think somebody's life is great, and then you wake up one day and they committed suicide. It's like nobody knew that this person was going through some things.
Yeah, man.
You know?
And that's where I think, you know, just with all things in life, you know, you've got to find that, you know, there's, I don't know if you're familiar with the Tao, you know, but you got to find the Tao.
Yeah.
Which is that middle ground. It's that balance of power where everything unites together. So that's how I handled it. Right, wrong, or indifferent. And there's a lot of great things, you know. I bought my dad a truck when he didn't have a car.
That's awesome.
I bought my brother and sister a vehicle. I helped send them both to college. You know, I bought my mom a house. You know, I made a lot of money, and I was able to be very generous.
That's awesome.
You know, I sponsored a missions trip to Africa every year for 7 years for my church.
That's awesome.
And our family paid for 100% of it. And it wasn't an insignificant amount of money.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of really good things we were able to do to give back because of the action that created the revenue. You know, so that was good. It wasn't terrible, and I don't entirely regret it, but there's no way I would live my life that way today.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's why in my heart, you know, I'm rediscovering who I am.
Yeah.
Remember I said that, you know, and for any business owner out there, anybody that needs some help or finds themselves between a rock and a hard spot, if you'll slow down and ask, what do I want? Why do I want it? Who do I need to help in order to get it? And how am I going to get it done? And just get very, very specific.
Focus and narrow on that.
It works. And it doesn't work sometimes.
Yes.
It works 100% of the time.
All the time.
And I've been implementing that process for the better part of a decade. And it works, man. But there's one thing I missed. Who am I?
Yes.
Right?
That's what you're searching for still.
Who am I? And the hardest thing to be sometimes is just yourself. So when I think about who I am today, you know, like there's these people that God's putting in my life, right? And they're challenging me. They're saying stuff that makes me uncomfortable.
Yes.
Like, you're supposed to be in front of a camera.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, I know that's probably true.
Yeah.
But my ego wants to be like, no, don't want to do that. It ain't about me. I'm just going to go back to what's familiar, the familiar pain.
Yes.
Right? The other thing that I realized, you know, for the next 10, 15, 20 years of my life, I don't know how many more businesses I want to start myself. Although there'll probably be several more, but man, there's just, it hits a little different.
Yes.
When I put myself in a mentoring position.
Yes.
To somebody who's already a founder, because I get to use, like, I can relate to them on so many levels, man. Does that make any sense?
Makes sense. Yep.
So, so those are some of the things that are coming in terms of clarity, but you know, most people ask for an easy life. And that's the worst thing you could ever wish upon yourself.
You said most people ask for an easy life?
Most people ask for an easy life, you know? And that's the worst decision. That's the worst thing you could ever wish on yourself.
Yeah.
Or on somebody that you love. Don't ask it to be easy, man.
Yes.
In life, if you want anything worthwhile, it's uphill the whole way.
It is.
The whole
way. Yeah.
But through that pain comes gain.
And wisdom.
Right.
Yes.
And then when you slow down a little bit and you're not just massive action all the time, there's something even cooler that happens, man.
What is it?
God blesses you in your heart and in your mind.
Yeah.
And he puts people around you, dude.
Yes.
That can do things with the snap of a finger that might take you a year or two or 10 of grinding.
Yes.
So that's what I'm learning. And that's what I would also say to anybody out there that's, whether they're a dreamer, you know, they could be 18 years old, battling a really sad circumstance, just trying to get out of that. Or they could be 55 years old, you know, with 10 figures, cold hard cash in the bank. And I don't care where they are on those spectrums. It's just hard to be a human sometimes.
It is,
And it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
So wherever you are, high on that mountain or low in that valley, you've got to find who you are
first.
Number one, or it'll never mean anything. And then once you get clear on who you are, you got to find that balance of power between faith and acts.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Because there's no easy way to the other side. But you can't just be comfortably numb. Right? You can't do that way either. I wouldn't recommend it.